Big smiles. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome to a new segment here on the Manic Expression YouTube channel. We are calling it Age Before Beauty. I am Beauty.
I'm Age.
This is Carly.
Hi, this is James.
Hi. And we are going to be talking about something weird.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. I am 43 years old.
I'm 28 years old.
Mm-hmm. And we both love classic TV and classic movies.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're going to be discussing in this new show is how we perceive these things, because they're, classic TV that I grew up on, like I Love Lucy and the Andy Griffith Show, are not of my generation.
They're definitely not of my generation.
They're far
either.
more removed from her generation.
But they're also, TV shows that I grew up on too.
Mm. And how we perceived them, how we viewed them growing up, and how shows that for me were first run shows that I could remember very clearly watching, like Friends and Seinfeld, for her.
Well, I was like, maybe 2 when they were out? And so now it's okay. It's okay. We'll go get your walker. So now I can watch them on HBO Max, and they're some of my favorite shows.
Mm. And they are now old. They're very old.
It's okay.
I'm talking about you as well.
It's okay. It's okay. I'll go get my walker too. It's okay.
But perceptions of things change depending on the generation watching the content. And how Carly views something like I Love Lucy is going to be different than how I view I Love Lucy, which I'm sure is different than how my parents did when they were growing up watching it when it was first on.
Well, and what's funny is that your parents would be my grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing too, is that the reason why I grew up with shows like I Love Lucy and the Andy Griffith Show and shows like that is mostly because I was raised by my grandparents and my dad. Mm-hmm. So that's why I even have that type of influence. If I was a regular kid my age, I would probably have no idea what these shows even were.
Yeah.
So that's probably, why we get along so well.
Mm-hmm.
It's because we're both old.
Both old. And for me, having been a latchkey kid growing up, I would watch these shows because when I was living in Southern California on Fox 11, they would just have blocks of, like, an hour block of the Andy Griffith Show, an hour block of Gilligan's Island, Beverly Hillbillies, and then every day, like, 2 different 2-hour blocks of I Love Lucy. Mm-hmm. So it got to the point where I could actually recognize an I Love Lucy episode in the first second of it. I would go, I know exactly which one this is. Because they would just play them over and over and over again, and that's what I grew up watching. Mm-hmm. And the shows that were on when I was a kid, like Family Ties and Facts of Life, I watched those, and I have virtually no memory of them. Mm-hmm. They don't, I've never felt the need to go back and watch them. I've never felt the need to go out and buy the DVDs, which, again, if you want to talk about me being old. But those shows did stick with me. Mm-hmm. So I'm interested to hear, like, what you think of them, considering the fact, like, for me, they were old-fashioned when I was a kid. But I was only as, and this is awful, was only as removed from them, time-wise, as a kid today would be from Friends.
So, when I was growing up, I remember, like, whenever my grandparents were over, I would hear the Friends theme song, but then they would change it, and all of a sudden we'd be watching the Andy Griffith Show. So I would recognize the Friends theme song. I knew what it was, but I didn't know what it was until, like, years later when I was 20.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what I grew up with. I didn't grow up with like knowing what blocks were. I just knew what my grandparents were watching because that's what we would watch. We would just watch the Andy Griffith Show because it was on, just what was on the TV. I don't even remember what the channel was called, but we would watch Turner Classic Movies. I remember that TV show distinctly because it had all these classic movies on it. And then if you changed it, the channel down, it had all the classic shows on it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I grew up with. And, I didn't, I wasn't like you. I didn't have, the, I'm sorry.
Go on.
I didn't necessarily have the type of upbringing where, I could instantly, be like, oh, this is what this show is. This is what this show is. It was more of like, oh, okay, we're watching Grandpa and Grandma's show again.
Mm-hmm.
That's just kind of what it was. And then as I got older, I'm like, I really, 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 really like this show. So I started to disassociate what kids my age should have been watching. Because I started loving shows like the Andy Griffith Show. My favorite character, and you already know this, is Barney Fife.
Yeah. Because she is very Barney-like in real life.
I am, because I'm awkwardly lovable. And I'm only allowed one bullet in a gun. And it's supposed to stay in my pocket. I'm not even allowed to put it in the gun. But, that's the other thing, too, is that, even growing up, my friends would try to, talk to me even about, like, cartoons. And be like, hey, have you seen, the new Ed, and Eddie show? And I'm like, what? I know what Scooby-Doo is. And they didn't even know what the classic Scooby-Doo was. Because, that's the one kid show my dad and my grandparents would let us watch. And that was on Boomerang. That and the Flintstones, like the classic, cartoons.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you used to watch those too.
Yeah. Well, my mother tells me that my two favorite shows when I was very little were Scooby-Doo and Family Feud.
Yeah.
If you knew the way I grew up, you would understand.
So is that why, you're very combative, but also very good at, like, figuring stuff out?
Solving mysteries, yes. And why I wear an ascot sometimes.
Yeah.
So.
That's good,
But, no, and that is another difference between the way that Carly grew up watching TV and the way I did. You had choices.
Yeah.
I had channels. And whatever was on the 9 different channels that, not counting like UHF, which is a thing that doesn't exist anymore, but whatever was on those channels is what you had to watch. Right.
Well, the other thing too that is crazy to me is that, growing up in the early 90s going into the 2000s is that, we didn't necessarily have choices, but we did have VHSs. So yeah, we had more opportunities to, pick what we wanted to watch, right? But then all of a sudden we get Netflix, we get this big boom in streaming platforms. So of course, we're going to have more opportunities to learn more about these shows and everything. And that really opened up my mind to all these different TV shows because it made me explore more of what my grandparents would watch because I already had this background of loving the Andy Griffith Show, of loving I Love Lucy, and even the Red Green Show. Do you remember that show?
No.
Oh my God. So the Red Green Show is about this guy who basically he goes around and fixes stuff with duct tape. And he has these bunch of different characters, like friends and everything, and his main line is, if she doesn't find you handsome, she can at least find you handsy.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
You need to watch the show. You'd love it.
Okay.
But so it just, it's this show. You can stream it now. I didn't have to try to sit up late up at night trying to find it on like which PBS is it on. But then again, going back to, you only having 9 choices for TV, now I had, 3 different choices for which PBS is it on.
Yeah. Well, you had cable.
Yeah.
And
you probably had the rabbit ears and the, little dial
on,
and
there was
snapping it.
The TV that was basically like a cabinet, and you'd turn the...
Yeah.
Well,
what's crazy is that I remember in our kitchen in our house, so we had 2 TVs. We were the cool house in the early 90s. We had the TV in the living room, but then we had this tiny TV in our kitchen, but it had the huge antennas and everything. And I remember it playing in black and white, and it would be playing our cartoons while we were eating breakfast. Yeah. And then it didn't last very long because then it died on us, but it was still one of those things of just remembering, oh, things have really changed now.
Yeah. Well, and now, if you brought up streaming, if you want to watch something, you pretty much can watch any episode of anything that you want to watch anytime you want to watch it. And, which is, we were talking earlier before we started filming about the Andy Griffith Show, which seems to be the one that we really are most bonded by. At a certain point, when I would watch Andy Griffith when I was a kid, it would get to season 6, and season 6 is when it switches to color, and Don Knotts isn't there anymore, and it is god awful TV.
You mean when it should have stopped and just needed to just
end? When they just kept the corpse of it going for another 4 years, and I would tune out. I guess that's when the comic books would come out, or God forbid I go outside and play. Yeah. But that was what was on. When Lucy and Ricky moved to Connecticut,
that's when
I would be like, all
right, gotta stop.
But now you can watch anything that you want anytime. And for you, it wasn't quite to that level yet. No. But it was at least where, okay, you've got, as opposed to 9 different channel options, you've got 138.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely blessed. I definitely growing up in an era where I get the choice of being I'm going to buy seasons 1 through 5 on Amazon of the Andy Griffith Show because the rest are trash. The rest are trash, and these ones make me happy. They make my little happy brain chemicals go, yes. And
at some point, Opie forms a band.
Yeah, and it just, all of a sudden you realize that Opie is a redhead. Don't let this fool you. I'm a redhead too. But it's one of those things where, you get these options of picking and choosing what you want to watch and what actually makes you happy. Or if you want to be really weird, you want to watch those episodes that make you feel something. Because that's what TV is. That's what movies are. They make you happy. They make you feel something. They are precious to you for a reason. That's why I love film. That's why I love movies. It's because they give you that connection. That's why I've always loved the classics, even since I was little. I remember watching the Andy Griffith Show with my grandpa, sitting on the couch. That's what we would do. Even just hearing the theme song, the whistle. I would walk in through the door, after being picked up from daycare from my dad. If I heard that whistle, I knew my grandpa was there, and I would run down to the basement and sit on the chair with my grandpa and just be like, okay, this is what we're doing. The show is on. But that's because there's the connection there. That's what movies and television is supposed to do. It's not supposed to be this trash.
No, what it has become is a word that I really, truly hate, which is content. And none of these current crop of shows that are on Netflix or anything, people forget them 10 seconds. They might be a phenomenon for a week, and then they are completely and totally forgotten.
Right.
And I would say probably around like the last shows that really grabbed everybody and held them, and and appealed to a large audience that they're now considered classics are The Office, Parks and Rec, and 30 Rock.
Yeah.
And those are now kind of on the brink of becoming kind of classic TV themselves.
I would agree with 30 Rock and The Office. I would not agree with Parks and Rec.
Oh, I didn't really watch Parks and Rec, but people remember it fondly
Yeah.
as like a show.
Okay, but that's the thing too, is that I agree with that, is that content, especially in this generation,
Mm-hmm.
it's terrible.
Yes.
There's no heart in it, and that's what makes it sad. And you see all these shows getting accolades and awards, and then you have people who are like true show and movie buffs just sitting there and being like,
Mm-hmm.
why? Because granted, if you look at classic TV shows, like, and we talked about this before, like in once again, the Andy Griffith Show, some of the people in Mayberry really, really sucked.
Mm-hmm.
And and granted, back in that time, there were a lot of things wrong in that time period.
Especially in that part of the country where
Yeah.
the show is set.
Right. So there are a lot of wrong things, but it's the fact of that there's heart in the content.
Mm.
There's heart in what they were trying to create. That's what's missing and what we're needing nowadays. Everyone's too, I hate to say it, offended.
Yeah, no, yeah.
But also I feel like they're just running out of pure ideas. I feel like they're running on, okay, let's just drag this idea and just keep repeating it and repeating it and repeating it. Or look what Disney's doing. They're taking movies and trying to make it into shows.
Yeah.
And I don't think that does any good.
Oh, and I mean, like they did a show like there was a sequel to the movie Willow,
Mm-hmm.
which I didn't watch, and apparently nobody else did either. And after less than a year of it being on Disney Plus, they took it off so that they didn't have to continue to pay the actors and everybody residuals. So Willow doesn't exist anymore. The TV show, it's gone. And that's the problem with streaming, is you can just make things disappear. And they're kind of meant to be disposable. They're only there to make people want to subscribe to the channel by saying, look at all of the options.
Mm-hmm.
But then when people get these streaming services, what do they watch? They watch Friends, they watch The Office, they watch... when Netflix lost Friends and The Office, their stock dropped.
Mm-hmm.
Because those were the two top shows that everybody watched.
I will definitely say that I watch Friends all the time on Netflix. Like, that was my go-to show. I didn't watch anything else on Netflix. I don't even watch Netflix anymore.
Mm-hmm. I don't either.
I just don't. Like, if I have to go on to Netflix for any reason, it's because my two kids want to watch rabbits.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I swear to God, that is, if you watch rabbits, dig a hole,
Mm-hmm.
put yourself in it, cover the hole.
I don't know what this is, so I guess I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I know what Blippi is.
Dig a hole,
Mm-hmm.
put yourself in it, cover the hole.
Salt the earth.
Yeah. Salt the earth. We need more trees. You are gonna be the tree now.
Mm-hmm.
Streaming platforms, they're good and they're bad, but they're not good for television because they screw the actors and they screw the television, like shows. You know, back in the day when you had, you know, the Andy Griffith Show, you had MASH, you had, you know, I Love Lucy, you know, the actors were still getting paid because they were on reruns.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have that now because Netflix, Amazon, HBO Max, all these different places can just take it away.
And I'm curious as to what your opinion is of like the difference between like I'll pick two shows, I Love Lucy and Friends, because I think those are probably the two biggest. I mean, you could argue Seinfeld maybe from not that long ago, but like Friends is the one everybody really remembers now and loves, and I Love Lucy is the one that was really remembered and loved. How do you feel about like the quality? Because Friends is like, that's the thing that when you were a kid, that would have been what was on.
Yeah, I feel like, so, okay, so what I'm seeing now, there's like two different sides of people when you see someone watching Friends, you know, and I hate it because, you know, you have someone like me who will watch Friends and see it as, you know, it's a product of its time. And it's good for its time. And, you know, there's characters that you love and hate in it. And there's characters that you absolutely find obnoxious in it. But that's what shows are supposed to do. And you're supposed to love and grow with these characters. That's what they're supposed to do. And then you have these other people who will analyze, and cancel culture the show. That's what some people are doing with Friends.
Monica being fat.
Ross cheating on Rachel and Emily and just being a dick. And he, in some sense, he is. I'm not, you know, disagreeing with that. But he still is a character that you can, you know, understand. Yeah. You know, he's just a character.
Well, and even like, for instance, I know one that they bring up with Friends is Chandler's dad. Yeah,
that too.
And
they got really mad that they brought an actual woman in to play a transgender man. And it's like, you know, you got to think about this. It was the 90s. My hair's getting in my mouth, sorry. If it was the 90s, it was a different time back then. They were doing something completely controversial. And at the same time, you got to think about it, they were still trying to be safe. And I think it was still a good step in the right direction. And I think they just need to leave it at that. I don't think it was a bad thing, and I think they need to stop saying that it was this terrible, oh, how could they do this? And it's like, you don't understand. If they had brought in an actual, you know, transgender individual,
which would have been difficult to find as far as like actors go,
that person possibly could have been in danger. You know, even in today's world, it's really hard for transgender people to come out, even though it's more visible now, it's more accepted now. People still can be attacked. You still hear it in the news all the time. You know, think about it back in the 90s and the 80s, even further on.
Well, and it also just, you know, Harvey Fierstein once said about like, and he was talking about gay representation, but it could go to trans representation too. Visibility at all cost. And he said he would rather see, you know, a stereotype than not ever see a gay character at all. And Friends, that again, it would be one of the first shows that had a major, like, I mean, not that Chandler's mom was like, or Chandler's dad was a major character in the show, but it appeared several times, and it's like, we have a transgender character. And yes, Chandler was embarrassed by it, and he was...
I think Matthew Perry did a very good job at portraying an individual who had a struggle with it because I feel like any child would struggle with
Well,
it, especially a
back
male.
then. And especially back then,
Yeah.
too. And that, I mean, because I think people don't judge the older shows as harshly, but you absolutely, I Love Lucy, there's one of two things happening there. Either Ricky is an abusive husband, or they've got a major kink going on, because she gets spanked a lot.
Or it could be both.
Or it could be both. And, but you also, I mean, I brought up the episode earlier about Lucy gets a black eye.
Yeah.
And Fred and Ethel think that Ricky hit her. And at first, they're horrified. And they're like, you know, Fred says something to the effect of, imagine hitting a woman. Later on in the episode, he catches up to Ricky on the street and he says, hey, I wasn't really mad at you. I get it. And, you know, he's talking about how, you know, even if you were right, you got to be big about it. And it's like, if you were right, you think that he punched his wife in the face.
Yeah.
But you have to look at it as, at that time, people wouldn't have been shocked by that.
Well, the other thing too is that what people don't understand about back in that time, and this is another very hard thing to grasp for people, is that back in the 50s and 40s, it was still legal to rape your wife. Because that's what our society was. You know, that the man was the man and the woman was subservient to the man. And it wouldn't have been uncommon. You know?
No, I have trauma in my family's past with stuff like that. And it was just, if the cops came at all, they would just go, oh, well, keep the noise down.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and speaking of which, there's an episode in Andy Griffith, I don't know if you remember it, but it's where there's a couple who yells, screams, and fights all the time, and Andy is trying to teach them how to go, yes, dear. Yes, honey. I love you, dear. And then they start to lash out to their neighbors and everyone else, and then he has to try to revert them back to being mean towards each other, so then they're nicer to everyone else. And it shows how different everything was back then, but it still somehow made good quality content in the TV shows.
There was a couple of episodes of the Andy Griffith where they would hear about, you know, so-and-so's husband, like, he really popped her one in the jaw, or, you know, and you go, woof. Okay.
Yeah.
But that was, if in that time period when that was filmed, that's something that a sheriff's department would have gone,
Yeah. You know, and that's the thing too, is loving classic movies, is that, not movies, classic shows, well, in general, you got to keep that in mind. And it's hard to keep in mind, but if you're a classic fan, that's how it was. Yeah. And that's hard sometimes to think about. And that's what's hard when coming into trying to make new content, especially during cancel culture. It's gonna clash. Yeah. And it's like, what do we bring up now? What do we do now? What can we even bring up from the past to make quality content?
Well, I mean, you brought up, like, one of the shows that you would watch was MASH.
Yeah.
The very first episode of MASH has a racial slur in it. Three's Company, which was one that I grew up on, like, as far as like a later, meaning like late 70s, early 80s show, was the whole idea was that John Ritter was pretending to be gay. Yeah. And, you know, everything was fairy and homo and, you know, jokes at the expense of him being gay. But the fact that they even were like, we're going to talk about this, was a giant deal. And I think the further you get away from the simplicity of something like I Love Lucy or Andy Griffith or Gilligan's Island, the more it gets scrutinized as far as like, well, that wouldn't really happen. Or if it did happen, we're very offended by it.
Right.
By the time you get to Friends, it's like, that's basically the real world.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's messed up. Is that, you know, some of these shows that are seen as lighthearted and everything have so many dark undertones.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't pay attention to it, you completely miss it.
Yeah.
And then when you see these other shows that are supposed to be reality, it's like, no, that's completely fake. That's not how the real world works. In Friends, all Monica, Phoebe, Rachel, Chandler, Joey, Ross are always at the coffee house. I think in
the same exact seat.
And in one episode too, Joey even says, well, no wonder your bosses hate you guys. You're always here having coffee. You know, they're never at work. How is that reality?
Yeah. And now you get into something like The Office, where it's filmed in this documentary perspective, and and at some point after I think it was like 9 seasons it was on, you go, who's filming this?
Yeah.
And how are they getting this footage all the time? And
right.
It starts to break the reality, which is why like a show like 30 Rock, which would be the one that I most from that period enjoyed, there was an unreality about that. It was silly.
Yeah.
And it was silly in a way where you had to just go, okay, we're not in the real world with this.
Well, what's funny is that I never watched 30 Rock or The Office until I was in my 20s. You know, I knew what they were when I was a kid because my parents would watch them. But I didn't really dive into it because I was just kind of like, had no interest. Absolutely no interest. I thought they were boring because they were just showing someone's face.
Yeah.
I was like, this has no storyline, this has nothing. Nope. Then when I got into my 20s, I was like, oh, this is actually kind of funny. You know, it actually kind of showed like, oh, yeah, this I could see this kind of being like what it's like at the office, and people getting frustrated and people having a, you know, twisted sense of humor about, you know, how, you know, working sucks.
Yeah.
Being an adult sucks.
Yeah.
So.
And then with 30 Rock, just the idea of media and how it changed, and again, just the silliness of it. The Office, I always had a problem with because the humor was so awkward and the situation so awkward that I would start to feel like, oh, I don't want to watch this happen.
Yeah. As much as I love Steve Carell, I don't like his character.
No.
He's better in movies than he is in television. But then in even some movies, he makes me cringe.
Yeah.
He's a love-hate type of character. Sorry to those who love him.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
But there is one through line that goes from when I was a kid to when you were a kid to our kids being kids to my granddaughter now being a kid. And that is The Simpsons. And for me, I was there day one with The Simpsons. I remember it being on the Tracy Ullman show.
I don't even know what that show is.
It was a sketch comedy show. The Simpsons started there as little shorts.
Okay.
And then the first episode was a Christmas episode.
Okay.
And I think it was not even the first, it was supposed to be just like a one-off special or something, and then it was really popular, so they made it a show. But I recorded it. I don't remember why I didn't just watch it when it was on, but I recorded it. The next day I got up early and I watched it while my parents were still asleep. And Bart sits on Santa's lap, not knowing that Santa is Homer. And Homer says, "I'm Santa Claus. Who are you?" I'm Santa. And Bart goes, "I'm Bart Simpson. Who the hell are you?" And I went, "Did that cartoon character swear?" I played it back and back and back.
I think the one thing that I love about Bart Simpson is that Bart is voiced by a woman.
Mm-hmm.
When I found that out, as like, I think I was 19 years old, I was like, and I actually found that out by watching a Netflix like documentary on voice actors, and I about pooped my pants because it is the same voice actor who voices Chucky from Rugrats.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, and I just sat there and I'm like,
Nancy Cartwright.
yeah, I sat there and I was just like, oh my god. So I was so happy, and that's what made me love The Simpsons even more, because I didn't really watch The Simpsons growing up. I knew The Simpsons because of, my uncle, who we compared to Homer all the time, because he's essentially the embodiment of him. And then also just watching a few episodes here and there and laughing at the fact that, Bart would get into trouble all the time. He was the oldest, and he would, try to sneak out of, trying to, being in trouble. And that's kind of how I was. It's not necessarily that I would, get into trouble. It was just the part of being like, I didn't do it. And it's just that his mannerisms I've really kind of connected with, that I loved. But then when I found out that Nancy Cartwright voiced him, that's when it really kind of gripped me into it. And then when they made the Simpsons movie, that was the staple for me, where I was like, okay, I'll start watching it.
Now, do you remember around what age you were when the Simpsons movie came out?
I think I was in high school.
Okay.
I think.
I was 28 years old when I was taking my kid to go see it.
We're old.
We are. But so at that point, I mean, that was way into The Simpsons being on. So if that was sort of your entry point, that would have been like season, honestly, like 18 or 19 or something like that.
Yeah, maybe. But the other thing too is that I was way more into Family Guy before I was even into The Simpsons. My dad, more specifically, was very against us watching adult rated content. So sorry, Dad. At about like 12 at night, I would sneak down into the basement and watch on our tiny television, Adult Swim, and they would have sometimes The Simpsons on, or was it Fox? I think it was Fox, but I would interchange between Fox and Adult Swim because it would be on Family Guy or The Simpsons. So I'd interchange depending on which one was on. And I vaguely remember some of The Simpsons episodes. But one of my favorites was when, I believe when, I'm trying to remember what it was, but Bart had gotten his, like, friend somehow to, his neighbor had somehow convinced him to convert to Christianity, and Homer was pissed.
Oh, okay. No, I remember this episode, yes.
Yeah. And because Homer was like, but that's my son. And I just kind of sat there and I'm like, I kind of feel this on some weird level. Not because of my dad, but because of a different individual in my life. But it was one of those things where it's like, I don't know why The Simpsons is hitting on Christianity, but this reminds me of so many Christians that I have met, that they can be really nice, but kind of weird. Like, I don't know how I'm trying to say this right now, but how you...
They could be a Ned Flanders.
Yeah, a Ned Flanders.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of my introduction to The Simpsons, is that episode, specifically the Ned Flanders episode, is that episode. And that's what got me into it. And then when Family Guy and The Simpsons collaborated, that's what got me into it.
Yeah. And I mean, Family Guy for me, again, was later. The first time I watched Family Guy, I remember I was watching it when I got home from work. Like maybe 19 years old or something. And The Simpsons, by that point, for me, had gotten really stale. And Family Guy was a breath of fresh air. And now Family Guy is, you'll have Rick and Morty. And Rick and Morty will be the thing where everybody's like...
I hate Rick and Morty with a burning passion. I absolutely hate it. I think it's terrible.
Sorry, Rick and Morty fans, but...
I'll just dig it my own hole, get in it, and he can put the dirt on me to appease you guys. Yeah, I mean, everyone has their tastes. The reason why I don't like Rick and Morty, like, granted, they do have some good storylines. I'll give them that. I will give you that. I don't like how abusive Rick can be.
Yeah.
That's my issue with it.
So, I mean, I think then that your issue with it is the same issue I have with The Office, which is Steve Carell's character is supposed to be cringy, but I'm so cringed out by him that I don't enjoy it.
Yep, that's my issue with it.
Rick is supposed to be abusive. You're not necessarily supposed to like him.
Yeah.
But for you, it's like, oh, okay, this is
too much.
Too much for me.
Well, and being just a parent in general, it's not something that I want my kids to watch. I don't want them to think that the behavior's okay. And that's something that speaks to me.
Well, and I mean, the further along we get into all this, the less family friendly the content does become, because anybody can watch I Love Lucy or the Andy Griffith Show.
Right.
I mean, as a kid watching Gilligan's Island, there's nothing in there. Like, okay, Ginger wore
coconuts.
I mean, even that would be like, that's as far as it went. Most of the time it was just a very tight dress.
Yeah.
And then you get into Three's Company and MASH, and it's a little bit more suggestive. And then you get into like Murphy Brown and Cosby Show. We're not going to go there.
I'm sorry. I think you said something, but I couldn't hear you.
If you say it 3 times, you'll appear.
No. All the times that, like, Family Guy has joked about Cosby and everything, like, I just sat there and I'm like, you're going to beat this horse until it's dead, aren't you? And they do.
Yeah. That is what Family Guy does.
Yeah, that is their trope.
But now you look back on, like, I think even modern Family Guy. And nothing, I mean, granted they're on network TV, it doesn't approach Rick and Morty at all. No. And it does get to the point where, like, yes, with The Simpsons, I would let my granddaughter watch just about any episode of The Simpsons. I'd be a little more cautious about Family Guy, but then with Rick and Morty, it's like, when you're in high school, if you want to watch this, fine.
Yeah. And
I think, even looking at, like, Friends is now very tame.
Yeah.
At the time, or even, I mean, I think the better example actually is Seinfeld, because I remember when they did the Bet episode.
Yeah.
That was a big deal. They conservative groups wanted that show canceled because of that episode.
You know what's funny about that episode is that I distinctly remember, like, walking in on that episode and my stepmom rushing to grab the remote and clicking it off. Because it was like, I don't remember what time of night it was, but they had been up watching it, right? Because that was my dad and my stepmom's show for when the kids and I, like, when we were heading up to bed. This is like in the early stages of them dating. But I remember them taking the remote and clicking it off, and it was Seinfeld.
Mm.
It wasn't until years later that they told me that it was that episode.
Mm. Well, when mom and dad wanted to get spicy back in the 90s, they'd watch Seinfeld, and then, if they were really naughty, they'd watch NYPD Blue. And, and that was what the choices were at the time. And NYPD Blue, somebody said shit. Oh God.
No.
And you got to see somebody's butt. Oh, yeah.
Now you can watch stuff like Game of Thrones and get a whole, full frontal.
Yeah. Which, like, the next step is just porn.
Yeah. I mean, you might as well just put on the hub.
Yeah. That'll be like 10 years from now when we're like
in the nursing home.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'll be in the nursing home, I'll be a CNA.
You won't be that far behind me.
20 years. But, it's just the thing with, like you said, I would let my kids watch The Simpsons. The Simpsons is even on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
We've watched the Simpsons movie with, my kids. It's harmless. Family Guy, we're not going there with them yet.
That's a little bit more
mature. Yeah.
But not.
It's not Rick and Morty.
It's not Rick and Morty.
But, that's the thing, too, is that these shows are becoming progressively more provocative and intense as the years go by. And I'm not saying it's necessarily a good thing. I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing.
No, as a man currently making an R-rated animated movie, I wholeheartedly endorse it. So,
not that I'm in it or anything. I have a fun character in that movie.
A little behind the scenes right now. Yes, she has a part in the movie. That was basically how I was reacting when I was directing her for the part.
I'm very good at Cali Girl impressions. We'll just leave it at that. Even though I'm from Minnesota.
Which is, another thing too. You're from Minnesota.
Oh yeah, I'm from Minnesota, don't you know?
Yeah, I currently live in Minnesota, but I'm from California originally.
Oh
so.
Yeah. Like, oh my God, you're from California?
So, I don't know, even there was where growing up for me, and I've talked to people who are who now live here, or I now live here, people who grew up here, and I'll tell them about just what I thought was normal childhood, teenage stuff, and they're like, you got up to some gangsta shit.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it really depends on where you are. Because I grew up northern Minnesota. And gangster shit is not what I would describe what I did. The worst thing that I ever did growing up was hang out with my friends and not be where I was supposed to be. I was supposed to be at ski practice, and me and my friends decided to go play in a baseball field.
Yeah.
I'm such a rebel.
I bought drugs.
I had never even smoked pot until I was an adult. I never even tried any of that.
So then for you, watching something like Seinfeld or Friends, what was because for me it was okay, that's another, I wasn't from New York, but I was it's another big city.
So New York, I guess it was one of those things where it seemed like a far off distant place, the biggest city I had ever been to. So even when we would make trips out to St. Paul or Minneapolis, I was just what is this place? You know, and it was a mind-boggling to me. So when I would watch these shows, I would sit there and I'd be like, they're in New York. This is so different. I want to go there one day. And then, of course, I go there one day and I'm like, I want to go to Minnesota. They drive crazy. I want to go. I want to go home. I even went to San Diego one time for filming a video vlog, and I got paid for it. And you know, again, I love the experience and everything. It was a really big city. It was a beautiful city. Coronado Beach was beautiful. Once again, you guys drive like crazy. But
I'm not crazy about Minnesota drivers.
Okay. Everyone sucks. But it was one of those things where it's like, it was so different. And I just sat there and I was like, I like traveling. I like seeing all these different places, especially if they're like from shows that I've seen. I'm ready to go home. But, you know, that's the fun part about TV shows and, you know, movies and everything. They show you these places that you want to go. And then when you actually go to the places, you get really excited.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you know, you're kind of living your, you know, fantasy out a little bit. Maybe not extravagant because you don't have all the, you know, budget and everything, but you're still like, I'm here.
You're living your fantasy out unless your girlfriend dumps you in front of Nakatomi Plaza, which happened to me. So.
Yeah, no, anytime I've traveled, it's been by myself, and I've, you know, done pretty well for myself. Had some, you know, margaritas and street tacos, and haven't been dumped. So, but you know, if you need, I have a tiny violin here for you.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
I can't hear it. Let me turn the hearing aid up just a little bit.
It's scratchy.
So then, in conclusion, like when you look back on these shows, I Love Lucy, Andy Griffith, you know, Gilligan's Island and the Munsters and Beverly Hillbillies and all those shows. When you look back on them now, and you also have to compare them to Friends and those shows from when you were coming up, like, do you have a preference?
Yeah, I do. And it's weird thinking that I have a preference because, you know, I never thought I would have a preference because of how much I love movies and shows just in general because they're an escape. But I do find myself loving the older, like, shows just because they feel more at home. They feel more comfortable, even if they have these dark undertones and everything. For whatever reason, they just seem simpler. And they seem to have like these more catching storylines, and they don't have to try as hard.
Yeah.
What about you?
I mean, I now look back very fondly on Seinfeld and Friends and those shows. But I still got to go with the older shows. They are, to me, more rewatchable. I think Friends is really up there as far as, like, I appreciate Friends now more since it's been off the air for 20 years than I did when it was on. And I was a little bit like, I am 10 years younger than like everybody in that cast. So when they were in their mid-20s, I was in high school. By the time I'm in my mid-20s, the show's over and they're all married and have kids. It's very different because with shows like I Love Lucy and Andy Griffith and all that, there's no continuity. You can put on any episode, you don't have to know anything about the show, and there's no callbacks to something that happened 2 seasons ago. There's not even a callback to something that happened on the last episode. They are completely self-contained.
And it's something new. It's, you know, you're coming into the episode and you get a learn something new that's going on in Mayberry. You come into something new with I Love Lucy, and they're, you know, juggling chocolate off of a conveyor belt.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's one of my favorite episodes, just because I would do that. I would struggle super hard. I think I would probably lay on the conveyor belt and just sit there and be like, I'm done. I'm done. I can't do it.
And I mean, even if you're going to something like Star Trek, which I didn't really grow up on, like I've watched it as an adult, but you pick any random episode of Star Trek, you could watch it and you don't have to know anything about Star Trek. Now every single episode not only ties in, like, it's one continuous storyline the whole season, but it also ties into 3 other shows that you have to watch, and it starts to get overwhelming. I mean, that's what I feel. I gave up on things like Star Wars and Marvel because at a certain point I just got to the point where this is fucking homework.
Yeah,
and I don't want to do it anymore.
So I still love Marvel. That's because in some sense Iron Man saved me. Not gonna go into it. But after, like, the Infinity, like, War or whatever the last Avenger movie was, I'm like, okay, I'm done. Like, I didn't even go off and watch, like, Thor movies, the Captain America movies. I'm just like, nope. I'm gonna watch the Iron Man movies and I'm gonna watch the Avenger movies. That's it. I'm not gonna do anything else, because otherwise, like you said, it's homework.
Yeah.
Because yes, the lore is great. You know, and if people want to do that, that's great. But when you have something, you don't want to complicate it too much, because that's when you'll lose your fans.
And I think that is something that the fact that people are en masse, like, deleting Disney Plus subscriptions, and Marvel movies are bombing, and, you know, it goes to show that just having a simple, self-contained story, like the first Iron Man was, you just watch Iron Man. You don't have to know anything about anything else. And with those classic shows, you could just watch them. Doesn't matter what episode it is. Could be, maybe you have your preference on what episode you like, you don't like, but they're one and done. And not to say that I don't like serialized storytelling and stories that, you know, continue on over years sometimes, but
don't have a tree and have all these branches networking out.
Yeah, it gets to be too much, and there is just there's a warm, cozy simplicity to the classic TV shows that I really miss. And the great thing though is I can watch those shows and they're still funny to me, and they're still fresh, and they're more so even than shows that would come later on, because I feel like they get too specific about world events. They get too specific. Andy Griffith, it's the South in the 60s, and there is no discussion of civil rights. And a show nowadays would, you couldn't do that. You'd have to touch on it. And at the time they were just like, we're trying to make you laugh, and that we're just not, you know, oh, the president was assassinated. We're not talking about it. You know, there's riots in the streets. We're not talking about it.
Well, one of my favorite characters in that show is Otis. He's the town drunk. He knows that there is no drinking allowed in the town, that they're a sober town. He will stumble into the, jail drunk. He will lock himself into the jail and put the keys back, and he's just like, and fall asleep. And they do it purely just to make you laugh. They know it's wrong, what he's doing.
And every now and then they touch on it.
Yeah. But they're doing it simply to just make you laugh. And that's what makes the show good, is that they can make fun of small, stupid things. They don't touch on these big, grand scale things because they don't want to make fun of that. Yeah.
And consequently, because they don't touch on those big, grand scale things, the shows don't feel quite as dated
Mm-hmm.
as other shows that came along later and had to talk about the Iraq War or, 9/11 or whatever.
That's why I have a hard time watching military shows.
Mhm.
Like I like watching MASH, and it was during the Korean War. That's what the show is based around. But I think that's the only military show I can watch.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I can't watch these gung ho war shows. Just because of how much they, press on all these military conflicts that we have, and I think it just adds on to all the political unrest that we already have.
Yeah.
It just adds on to the anger and everything else that's going on.
And sometimes all you want is a simple show that you can watch and it'll make you feel good.
Yeah.
And that's what we used to get.
Yeah. And I mean, if we want to be angry about something, let's just turn on the news.
Or not.
Or not. Just block it out.
Okay, everybody. So we hope you enjoyed this. And if you like it, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the Manic Expression channel. Next time, we will be discussing some movies.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Carly.
Thank you, James.
We will see you next time.